Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with Sherry Shaban. Hello, everyone. I am LaurieAnn. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia, and today I'm so excited about having Sherry Shaban with me. She is, this is wonderful. She is the creator of Make Peace with Food method and the anti-diet health coach. Don't we just love that anti-diet idea? Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, LaurieAnn. I'm so honored to be here.
So I always like to ask the journey, what brought you to becoming, at first creating the Peace with Food, and then of course the anti-diet health method that's really important as well.
Well, thank you. I actually got into the health and fitness space. I say I stumbled upon it by accident in my early 20s. And during that time, I was a big science nerd. I was doing my master's degree in chemistry at McGill University here in Montreal. And prior to that, when I was a teenager, I was struck by a car. I was in a very big accident where I ended up damaging my spine from it, going on to get back surgeries and being told I was never going to play sports again. And at that time in my life during those teenage years, I was Miss Varsity Athlete, and I identified as this person who's always MVP and always pushing her body to the limits. And so when I had my accident and then went on to have my first back surgery, I listened to the doctor's advice because that's what you're supposed to do at that time. And then I found myself in my early 20s really, really out of alignment with who I always thought I'd become. I was now this party animal, hanging out with a very different crowd, doing a lot of things that parents tell their kids not to do. And I just felt like, okay, something's got to change. Even though I was relying very heavily on pain medication, my whole world revolved around chronic back pain. I decided in that moment that I'm going to sign up at a gym. And I had no idea what I was doing at that time. Like I said, I was doing my master's degree in chemistry, but I ended up signing up at this gym and I just started copying what other people were doing. And within a span of a few months, I was able to come off my pain meds. I was pain free. I bought a treadmill. I started running. And then I decided to change career paths entirely and then go into the health and fitness space. So I dropped out of my master's degree. I went back to school, started studying exercise science, became an osteopath, a certified athletic therapist, took every certification there possibly was on fitness, on prenatal, postnatal, TRX, you name it, I did it. And I also at that time needed to learn everything there was about nutrition. Because if I was going to get into the health and fitness space, well, then I needed to tell people what to do, what to eat. And I, myself, as big science nerd, needed to find the right way to eat. So that was really where my journey with nutrition started, was actually calorie counting. Even though at that time I had no desire to release weight, it wasn't about having to change my physical body. It was really all about finding the science of nutrition. So I started counting calories, and then eventually I had heard that fat was really bad and we were supposed to eat a low fat diet because that's what everybody was doing. So then, okay, I switched to a low fat diet because there was science there. And then before I knew it, this guy named Atkins had come out and said, you know what? Actually, carbs are really, really bad for us. Fat is good, meat is good. And so since the science was there, LaurieAnn, I switched to that. And then I started doing the Atkins. And then eventually I opened CrossFit gyms. And that's where everyone was saying we're supposed to eat like a caveman. So I started eating like a caveman and I did the paleo and then eventually did the keto and then the zone. And I was even a vegan for a short amount of time, all because the science was there, all because I was obsessed with finding the right way to eat. And what I had started realizing over the years, and this is now a span of 10 years, moving from one diet to the next, constantly changing my food rules, constantly changing what I thought was good, was bad, even advising my own clients through meal plans. Here's what we eat, here's what we don't eat, here's how we're supposed to eat. What I had actually found was that I was getting very stressed around food and very, very confused around food because Every single diet was backed by science. Every single diet claimed to be the miracle diet, the way that we're supposed to eat. And what I started noticing was my Friday night cheat meal turning into a weekend long annihilation of all of the foods that you're not supposed to eat. And I didn't realize that this was a disordered relationship with food until this one moment where I was sitting there after my third bowl of oats. This was during the vegan phase. It was my third bowl of oats. And I was wondering, has anyone ever died from an explosive stomach? Like, is that a thing? Like, could my stomach actually explode from like how much food is in there right now? And that's when I realized that there was something wrong. I wasn't able to stop eating. No matter how much pain I was in, I couldn't stop eating. I felt so incredibly out of control. And here I am, this person with all these degrees and all of this studying, and I've owned two gyms, and I should know better. I should know what to do, but why can't I get myself to stop? And it was really in this moment that I started to first and foremost try to heal myself because I was hiding my eating behavior. I was driving to grocery stores to buy all the bad foods that my clients would never see me buy and eating everything in secret until I got sick. And then by Monday, I would start my fast and I would start cleaning up my nutrition. And then by Friday, I'm back into the cycle. I started learning about the nervous system and understanding that what I had actually done through all those years of restriction and years of dieting and labeling foods is that I had turned on my nervous system to start to fear food, to really go into starvation mode, to go into a threat situation where it was really trying to survive. And I call this nervous system state, which we all know as sympathetic nervous system state or fight or flight, as protection mode. Essentially, my body had started to protect me to make sure that I wouldn't perish by overeating, by overindulging. And that's when I really realized that there was something wrong. I had this behavior, and I started to notice that this same behavior was also showing up in the people that I was serving, the ones that I gave 6-week meal plans to. And I realized that we have to go deeper. This doesn't make sense. This fear of food, this feeling out of control around food, it is a nervous system issue. And that's when I launched Make Peace with Food, and I really moved away from dieting, food rules, and really started focusing on understanding what's behind our unwanted eating behavior versus what are we putting on our plate.
There comes a really interesting question. So the fear of food. So I think there's a combination. So my problem is my in my bulimia state, food was my best friend, and I
Yeah.
traveled a lot and I got moved a lot. I mean, 27 times in total, but the last few I've been okay, but the last couple. But prior to that, it was like almost like a friend that I was taking with me, not a good friend. So there was like that comfort in the food, but then also knowing that I didn't want it, which was why I was bulimic. So I got rid of it at the end of our session. So almost like being with the therapist and then getting out and going, no, I don't want to listen to this anymore. I mean, it's horrible to say, but it's kind of that.
Right.
Um, but the constant dieting, I really do feel that you're right there, that it does make you afraid. And in my case, I don't know if I can use afraid. I was afraid to be around food because I wanted to overconsume.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to a buffet with friends while I'm bulimic, it's scary because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to want to take on too much. I don't, and this is where your relationship with food comes in really big because it's not your enemy. Your eating disorder is not your friend.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, LaurieAnn, because anytime we look at a behavior that we have a hard time releasing, a behavior that is creating self-sabotage and not serving us in terms of physical health or maybe even interfering with certain aspects of our life, we have to understand that this behavior, the reason why we keep going back and doing this behavior is because it does give us something in the moment,
mhm.
but not in the future. after that moment. And that's why we do that. And food itself, unlike alcohol or drugs or any of the other um, coping mechanisms, let's call them, that we can use to numb emotions or to even have that rewarding feeling, that dopamine feeling. Food, we require food for, we require food. And food on a very, very primitive level feels like safety to the body because, again, we need food in order to survive. And that's why we keep coming back to it. Food is incredibly soothing. And from a nervous system perspective, we need food to survive. It is the quickest way that we can actually shift our state, even though temporarily. So you're correct in that it is this love-hate relationship. It's your best friend because you can always count on food to feel better in the moment or to give you pleasure for that instant, but then there is no control around it. And the fear, by the way, there's a lot of different angles in which we can see fear in this behavior. So obviously there's fear around food. And we know that if you've ever felt out of control around food and you know that you can't stop, like for example, your friends can stop or your family members can eat, they get full and they stop, there is this sense of fear. But in terms of a nervous system level, there actually is fear of starvation because we've obsessed and we've thought so much about how we're not allowed to do this thing. We're not allowed to have this food, or we've created these fearful associations with food. Maybe we've even restricted, and we oftentimes see this too after a big binge. It could be followed by several days of famine or even an episode of famine to try to make up for the binge. So purging in different ways, but we also need to acknowledge that the nervous system is feeling food scarcity. And that's what is driving the unwanted eating behavior. That's why it feels like that last supper moment. It's such a feast in that moment, and you can't stop. You're overriding all of the hormones that are giving you signals of satiety or of hunger. And instead, you are eating to satisfy a famine.
That's that makes sense. Very much so. Uh, so moving forward, so making peace with food and the anti-diet health coach, when you became one of those, how do you help with your clients to move from the diet mode? I mean, I grew up in the 80s. That's when it all blew up. Like that was a big thing. And that's when my bulimia started. And it started off with, I always call it a diet gone wrong. If you hear my stories,
Mm,
I knew what a diet was until my sister told me, my older sister. And then once on it, it's a hard roller coaster to get off of. Or I would even say a
mhm.
Ferris wheel. It keeps going around and around and around. Sometimes it's a roller coaster because you do actually get off of it for a bit, but then somehow you keep getting back on. So, and we discussed this prior to coming on. My biggest freedom was when I stopped dieting altogether. I eat what I want to eat. I do eat healthy because I choose to. But if I feel like a piece of chocolate, which I'm not a big chocolate person, or I like chips, I do. I will let myself have them. But I actually can stop. And it's been so wonderful to not be able to not have to restrict myself from anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the key. That's the word is restricting, right? It's the restriction implies that I want something, but I don't give myself permission to have it. It's very different to say I can't eat sugar versus I don't eat sugar. Like those are very two different statements. And in fact, all of the words that we say, all the language that we say that is felt in the body and that is believed in the nervous system. And so that idea of restriction is what drives unwanted eating. And coming back to your question, like how do we get somebody to stop dieting, especially when they've been dieting for years and decades? So support is so incredibly important when it comes to moving away from diet culture, moving away from diet mindset. Support is so important. And support is obviously going to start in our home environment. So we look at what is in our immediate environment. So I call this social sources. And this could be in our fridge, this could be in our pantry, this could be in our home. These could be the people that we're living with. So that needs to be addressed. And then the second thing too, support also can come in the form of a coach or a group of people who are doing the thing that you want to do. But if you are right now in that space where you're like, something is not working. I've been dieting my whole life, my whole entire life. I've been trying to lose weight. My whole entire life, I have been fixating and obsessing about my body. Every single vacation is about that. Every gathering is about that. Every time I go out and do something with friends, it's always about food and it's always about how I look. So if you're in that space and you're ready to make a change, the first step is really acknowledging that what I have been doing in the past is not working. And there has to be this acceptance and willing to release what is no longer working. And I find that's actually out of the whole process and the method that I use to really help people overcome unwanted eating behavior, that I find is the most challenging. Asking someone to stop weighing themselves, asking someone to stop restricting, because that is the first step. The first step is I have to move my focus away from these outside um, these outside influences, if you will, around the decisions that I want to make, and then really start to cue into my body, really start to listen to what does my body need in this moment, and how much do I need to nourish my body. And if I decided to stop eating now, is this food still going to be available to me in about 20 minutes or an hour? So, really giving yourself that full freedom to nourish yourself without using anything outside of you to reinforce you or to give you that validation that you're doing something right. And so when we think about apps or we think about calorie counting, we're always using these apps to reinforce validation. 1600K, or no, I shouldn't have eaten this because it's outside of my macro calculations. And instead, really allow yourself to tune back into your body. And that's the greatest thing that's actually missing from those of us who have been dieting for years and for decades. And so that's essentially the first step. Then the second step is to get curious around what's driving your unwanted eating. Not what are you eating? That doesn't matter. It's not what's on my plate. It's what's driving my unwanted eating. And through the Make Peace with Food method, I have pinpointed that it comes from three different places. So we have biological sources of cravings, we have psychological sources of cravings, and then we have social sources of cravings. And the social is something we just spoke about. The biological sources of cravings come from cortisol. So if our cortisol levels are high, if we're in fight or flight all the time, if we are not sleeping adequately, if we are consuming foods that spike our insulin and then crash our insulin, all of these result in cravings. But there are also psychological sources of cravings. So this comes from learning to use food to cope with unresolved emotions or unresolved traumas. And so all of these things need to be addressed. And the formula is very different for each person because it really depends on their nurturing, their background, their relationship with food.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Their upbringing, yeah, it's very interesting. The background and the growing up. I grew up, I had a really great childhood. Um, but I think that they're really mini traumas, right? Like I had three sisters, and so how you're treated by the sisters, how you, and I think that that's something that I always say to my audience, always understand. Some people say, "Oh, I was so traumatized." Yes, there are some people who had really big traumas, but there's also a collection of small traumas that can also lead you to that. And the thing is that you can't pinpoint them, and you don't know what they are. And I even said someone, so I still struggle with anxiety now and again. Um,
Mhm.
and I still get help for it. And there's some days I'm anxious and I cannot tell you why. I get
Right.
tired and I can't tell you why. So we're
Right.
trying to focus on that, but I've been trying to focus on that for the last 4 years. It's just like, uh, it's just how I'm made. My dad was like that too. He told me that he had those too. And I didn't know that until he was like in his 50s. You know, I wish he would have told me when I was younger, hey, it's okay if you have anxieties. It's something that, you know, and that's where you're talking about stresses. It could be that I wasn't eating properly or there's things that I
Right.
haven't solved, right? So same type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, LaurieAnn. And you bring up a really, really important point. Trauma isn't what happened to us. Trauma is how we responded to that thing that happened. And that is really, really key because now we can't judge the experience. What we're actually doing is we are getting curious around how our body is still holding on to that experience, how it's still responding to that experience, and it explains why all these mini little things that have happened to us in our life, they are important, they are valid, and they also need to be addressed in our healing journey.
absolutely. Uh, I really would love for you to be able to share with our audience how to get a hold of you. I think this is so very important. And my audience knows me. I am anti-diet. I don't believe that that is the solution. I think coming to terms with food, and learning to make it a friend. Like I really enjoy my food now, whereas before I enjoyed it in a different way. It was gluttony. It was like, you know, and oh, I can have whatever I want. Now when I have a bowl of ice cream, I actually appreciate it. Like it's just, it's so different. And I can sit down at a family meal and not worry about having to run and try and find an escape. So uh, it's freedom, right? So
It's absolutely.
yeah. So please
Yeah.
share with our audience where they can find you.
Well, to the quickest and easiest way to get in touch with me is through Instagram. So at Make Peace with Food Official is the handle. You also have access to my website where I have a lot of free resources around how to balance hormones, to reduce cravings, and really work on unwanted eating behavior. And that's sherryshaban.com. And then, of course, there's the Make Peace with Food podcast where I talk in way more depth around all these things that we discussed today.
I love it. I really appreciate you being here. These are the subjects that really matter to my audience, and people like you taking the time to come on here and share your story and your expertise really mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lorianne. I loved it.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.